Okay, so you know how there's always this pull towards the blank spots on the map, those like really isolated places
What was his
that haven't been
intention? Just for
completely
a
like
contact?
absorbed by,
He's a YouTuber too.
the modern world.
Right.
And I don't know about you, but I'm always kind of fascinated by uh those cultures that have really managed to stay isolated. But
Yeah.
as we're about to kind of dig into that fascination, it does come with some pretty serious dangers.
He was
Yeah,
trying to
that's right.
contact
The
the world's most
drive to
isolated tribe.
explore, to understand, it's a very powerful human thing. But when that drive leads us to communities that have chosen to stay separate, well, the potential for harm, for unintended consequences, it can get really big.
And that's exactly where we're headed in this deep dive today. We're looking into the recent arrest of a U.S. tourist, Mykhailo Viktorovych Polyakov, for his attempt to reach North Sentinel Island. Now, to really get why this is such a big deal, you need to know that this island is home to the Sentinelese tribe. They're
They're
widely
living there
considered
since
the most
1,000 years.
isolated indigenous group anywhere on Earth. And their fierce independence and their isolation are actually protected by law in India.
And that legal protection that you mentioned, it's not there without reason. It really shows how vulnerable these isolated communities are. Our mission today is to really break this whole thing down for you to understand what exactly happened, what are the risks for the Sentinelese, and what this incident tells us about uncontacted tribes in a larger sense and our relationship with them. We're mainly looking at recent news reports that detail what Polyakov did and what happened afterward.
All right, so let's dive into the details of what happened. Reports say this attempted landing was around March 29th. Mikhailo Polyakov, a 24-year-old U.S. national, is the one who's said to
Oh,
have made this trip without permission. Now, to fully understand this, you got to know the legal side of it.
if convicted,
Our forces are
8 years
clear.
prison.
North Sentinel Island has been completely off limits since 1956 under Indian law. And this isn't just some suggestion, it's a serious law meant to protect the Sentinelese people and their way of life.
You got it. That 1956 law that you're talking about, it was a step to shield the Sentinelese from outside interference, especially from the terrible impact of diseases that they wouldn't have any protection against. And this wasn't just some random decision. It probably came from understanding how bad contact has been for isolated populations in the past.
And even with this super clear law in place, Polyakov reportedly still got there. News reports
Oh,
suggest he actually landed on the island. Thankfully, though, there's no proof he actually met any of the Sentinelese people. He was seen a couple days later while coming back by a local fisherman, and that's what led to him being arrested.
When you look at the reports, it's really interesting how much he prepared. The authorities took his inflatable boat, the mobile phone, a GoPro camera, even a bottle of sand that he
the
supposedly
hotel
took
staff
from the
refused to
island.
go,
It really looks like he planned to
even though
get to
he.
this place and maybe even record being there.
It definitely seems that way, yeah. And the fact that he set off from a beach about 25 miles away in South Andaman after visiting the islands 2 times before shows this wasn't some random thing he decided to do. And then there's what he said during questioning, that he was driven by a thirst for adventure and the pretty weird claim that he left bottles of soda as gifts. But no one found any evidence of that. It's a strange mix of reasons, don't you think?
It definitely makes you wonder about the people who go on these risky trips that could really hurt others. That romantic idea of adventure often overshadows the real dangers they bring to the people whose isolation they're messing with. You have to ask yourself, what is it that drives this kind of desire?
Exactly. And as of right now, Polyakov hasn't been officially charged with anything. The U.S. State Department knows he's been detained, but they haven't said anything else. And we don't even know if he has a lawyer yet. But the Indian authorities
Comment
are
your
still
thoughts on
looking into
this
everything.
story.
Reports say they're
What
scanning
was
the
his
island from
intention to go
boats,
to
trying
the
to figure out what's
world's
happening.
most
But the rough
isolated tribe?
seas are making it tough for them.
It's a really good thing that they haven't confirmed any direct contact with the Sentinelese. That's important for their immediate safety. But even just landing on the island breaks the law, and as we'll talk about more, it carries huge risks for the tribe.
Which leads us to those risks that we need to consider. We can't overstate how unbelievably vulnerable the Sentinelese tribe is because they've been so isolated for so long. Caroline Pierce from Survival International said it very clearly. She called what Polyakov did reckless and idiotic.
Her words really show us how serious this is. As Pierce explained, groups like the Sentinelese haven't developed any kind of protection against the normal diseases we all get. Even just a cold or the measles could be devastating for them. It could wipe out a big part of the tribe or even all of them. This lack of immunity, meaning their bodies have no way to fight off even common illnesses that we've all had, is a really big deal.
Think about that. Something as basic as a common cold could destroy them. Our sources remind us that they depend completely on hunting, fishing, and foraging for food. They have their own deep knowledge of their environment, their own ways of living
Oh my God.
totally separate from the rest of the world. We know they use bows and arrows, spears, and those special outrigger canoes, and we think there are maybe somewhere between a few dozen to a few hundred of them.
And that small population makes them even more vulnerable. Any big loss of life, whether it's from a new disease or some kind of conflict, could mean their culture, their way of life would disappear forever. And the reports say they are very protective of their land.
Oh yeah. We've seen how strongly they defend their territory, even when people come too close by accident. There are times when they've attacked helicopters and boats that came too close to their island. This isn't just them being aggressive, it's a powerful message that they want to be left alone. It's how they protect themselves, something they've been doing for many generations.
And that really shows us how important it is to respect their boundaries. Their isolation isn't emptiness, it's a choice they've made. And that's what's allowed their culture to survive for so long.
And what we find in our sources gives us some really sad historical context that explains why this protection is so important. There's this awful incident from the late 1800s when British colonial forces took some Sentinelese people away from their island to the main Andaman Island. What happened was terrible. Those people got sick really quickly and died. It's a stark reminder of what happens when you bring outside diseases to these isolated groups and the damage of forced displacement.
That event from the past is a powerful lesson. It wasn't just people not understanding each other, it had deadly consequences. And ever since then, contact has been rare and usually hostile, which makes it understandable why the tribe doesn't trust anyone from the outside world.
And then there's the event from 2004, after that horrible Indian Ocean tsunami. Even with this huge natural disaster, when a relief helicopter flew over the island to see the damage and maybe offer help, a Sentinelese tribesman was actually photographed shooting arrows at it. That image says a lot about how determined they are to stay isolated.
Yeah, that picture became a strong symbol of their commitment to their own way of life. Even in a moment of crisis, they instantly wanted to keep outsiders away.
This whole thing makes you think about what happened in 2018 with John Allen Chau, the American missionary. The Sentinelese killed him after he went to the island illegally trying to convert them to his religion. It's an uncomfortable comparison, but we have to make it.
The similarities are definitely there, and it's a serious warning. What Jitendra Kumar Meena said in the reports is really important. He said Polyakov was lucky he did not make contact, otherwise he would have met the same fate. It shows how dangerous these attempts are, not only for the Sentinelese, but for the people who try to contact them.
You're absolutely right, and it makes it clear the Sentinelese have shown us what they want through their actions. Their isolation is their protection, and anyone trying to break through that is putting themselves and the Sentinelese in danger.
And if we want to see the bigger picture, you have to remember the Sentinelese aren't the only ones who want to stay isolated. Our sources say there are over 100 uncontacted tribes all over the world. Most of them are in the Amazon rainforest.
And there have been recent examples that, while they're different in some ways, they raise the same basic concerns. The reports talk about a young man from a remote Brazilian tribe who made contact for a little bit earlier this year, and those rare pictures from 2024 of Peru's Machco Piro tribe trying to avoid illegal loggers. These situations all show the pressures and threats these isolated groups are facing in our world that's becoming more and more connected.
It's interesting to see the different ways these interactions happen. Some are short and maybe not intentional from the isolated group often because things are pushing in on their land. Others, like what Polyakov tried, are deliberate attempts from outsiders to start contact.
And it makes sense that Survival International and other groups that support these tribes are worried. They're really pushing the Indian government to keep protecting the Sentinelese, especially from different threats, like missionaries, tourists who want something exotic, illegal fishing that's happening in their waters, and even scarier social media influencers who are looking for shocking content that could really exploit these people.
Their worries come from a long and often sad history of contact between industrialized societies and indigenous populations. Too many times it's led to terrible diseases, the exploitation of their resources, and their cultures being torn apart. Keeping that protected zone around the island is absolutely essential to make sure the Sentinelese have a future.
And that brings us to the big ethical and legal things we need to think about. Like we've been saying, Indian law has made it illegal to go to North Sentinel Island since 1956. Breaking these laws can get you in serious trouble. This whole situation really shows the clash between what some people see as exciting tourism or personal exploration and the basic right of uncontacted peoples to decide their own future and to survive in their own way.
It really makes you ask, do we have a responsibility as part of the global community? Does someone's desire for adventure, no matter how strong, outweigh our ethical duty to protect vulnerable cultures and their right to exist without being bothered? The law, as it stands right now, clearly says we need to prioritize their protection.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, the main point is really clear. This attempt to get onto North Sentinel Island shows just how fragile these uncontacted tribes are and how bad the consequences can be when someone tries to make contact without permission. The Sentinelese have made it clear they want to be left alone,
So why
and
are
that's
we
a choice
disturbing
we
them?
have to respect and protect.
Exactly. This incident reminds us that their isolation isn't some puzzle to solve or an adventure to go on. It's a shield that keeps them safe from the dangers of the outside world. And if that shield is broken, it could have really bad, maybe even permanent consequences.
And that brings us to something for you, the listener, to think about. We humans have this natural desire to connect and explore. It's part of who we are. But how can we balance that urge with the need to protect the freedom and survival of cultures like the Sentinelese that are so isolated? What responsibilities do we have as individuals and as a global community to find the right balance? It's a question that goes way beyond this one event and makes us think about what it means to be human and our place in the world.
Thanks.